Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today you are checking out a Magicka Templar PVP build. This is the AURORAN. So I've switched over from heavy armor to light armor. And because of that we're doing absolutely disgusting damage, especially in no CP and battleground situations where we're also making use of a couple of really nasty proc sets. This build just destroys anybody who's not ready for you. We've also got very good survivability and healing. I'm talking about close to 30k spell and physical resistance in light armor, plus extra damage mitigation on top of that from one of our defensive sets. So let's jump right into the video. We'll go over the stats, the gear, the skills, and more coming up next. All right, let's jump right into the stats for our Magicka Templar build. Usual disclaimers though, I'm not completely min-maxed on this build yet, you guys. Only been playing it for about a week, but it is super fun. You can always increase your stats with things like gold glyphs, golded out gear, better traits. I don't have the best traits yet on this build, unfortunately, because that would take a little bit of time to farm. But just as a baseline, here's what you have. About 33k max Magicka, 19k max health, that'll be about 24-ish. Max health in PvP, max stamina, 14.5k. Our recoveries actually all go up here with our potion, so let me go ahead and activate that. So 1700 Magicka recovery is pretty good. Keep in mind too, we also have some other sources of Magicka recovery on the Templar which are not going to show. We have 400 from our rune, for example, and another skill you can run that actually gives you closer to 600 Magicka recovery. So recovery is not an issue on this build. Stamina recovery is decent too at 700. For our spell damage, we have 1900 unbuffed, but we do have things like major sorcery, minor sorcery. So we will have about 2500 spell damage usually. And then with our just light attack here, Berserker Glyph, 2900 spell damage. So not bad at all there. Spell crit does go up. Again, about 39% spell critical there. And our physical and spell resistances, keep in mind this is a light armor build. When we're on our back bar, sword and shield, we have actually 30,000 spell resist and 26,000 physical resist. Not bad for a light armor build. Crit resistance 1900 right now. I do need some better traits currently. So 64 points into max Magicka, nothing new there. I am using the purple tri-stat food. I still think this is one of the best foods in the game. It just gives you the most access to flat stats. You get Magicka, stamina, health, all from this food. It's really good. Mundus Stones, you have some options here. Right now I'm using the Atronach Mundus Stone. That's for the extra Magicka recovery. Once we get into the Elseweyr chapter though, I think I'm going to switch this over to the Lover for a little bit more penetration. It's really going to make this build hit even harder. Right now, I like the extra sustain, but in Elseweyr, we're going to have access to a free sustain ability, which I'll talk to in a little bit. So Atronach for now, but you can change that around if you want. I am a stage 4 vampire. I still like Mistform on the old Magicka Templar build. I think it's really useful still. If you don't agree, you can always just drop this, and that's totally fine. For our potions, I mentioned we are using the tripods here. This is really good, you guys, for battlegrounds, specifically in no CP. PvP, you just really are going to need the extra access to stamina as well as health. Definitely recommend those. In terms of the race on this build, I am going with High Elf. High Elf makes a lot of sense on the Magicka Templar. You have extra recovery, either Magicka or stamina, just whichever one is lower at the moment. You get that every 6 seconds. A little bit of damage reduction, 5% on channeling, which our main spammable sweeps is a channel, so we do get a little bit of damage mitigation there. 2000 max Magicka is very nice, and then the 258 spell damage is what's really nice about the High Elf. Now, races like Breton are also going to be very beneficial to play as a Magicka Templar. Dark Elf's not bad because you get the spell damage still, and you also get stamina, so that's a nice PvP race for Magicka. Even Argonian's going to be pretty decent. You'll have very good sustain. Your spell damage won't be as high, obviously, so pick whatever suits your playstyle best here. I am a High Elf currently. So let's talk about the gear next. Taking a look at our first 5-piece set here. Shouldn't be any surprise if you notice the name of the build. We're using AURORAN's Thunder, which is a light armor set. This drops from the depths of Minotaur. It's one of the new DLC dungeons that came out in the Wrathstone DLC. Really interesting set here. We've got 1 max health bonus, 1 spell damage, 1 spell penetration, which is pretty rare. It's a nice bonus. And then for our 5-piece bonus here, when you damage an enemy with single target, you get a lightning effect from your chest for 3 seconds, and it deals pretty decent damage every half second. The cooldown is 6 seconds. So I was playing around with this set recently, and it's actually very good on a Magicka Templar because the effect is basically a melee effect. I can show you what it looks like here on the target skelly. So there you go. It's actually pretty wide and pretty long. It's a decent AoE effect. Now, why I like this on Magicka Templar is it basically is the same range as your sweeps. So when you're doing sweeps here, it basically is almost doubling up your damage as far as what you can do with sweeps. So the 1600 damage does not look like a lot, but keep in mind that is every half second. So you're getting 2 of those ticks per second, and then 3 seconds, so about 6 ticks overall. It's going to really nicely just add damage to your overall rotation where you're in the middle of doing sweeps on somebody, executing with them. It's just a nice combo. It's also AoE damage, so just like sweeps, it's not going to be dodgeable. And the cooldown is actually pretty quick, 6 seconds. Generally, your target will be down in 6 seconds, and you'll be ready to switch to a new target, and you'll get a brand new proc on top of that. So yes, this is a proc set. It is going to scale better in situations like Battlegrounds. You can use it in CP campaigns as well. I don't think it'll be quite as strong as it will on a BG build like this. Like I mentioned, this is from the depths of Minotaur DLC dungeon, so you need to do a little bit of farming here. The easiest way to run this is going to be on your body, so that's how I have it set up here. I'm using 5 pieces on the body. This is a light armor set, so all 5 is light. That's chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet. All impenetrable if you can. If you have time to farm that, that's going to be ideal. All max Magicka as the trait. Now keep in mind, if you run this on the body, that means you don't have to run the entire dungeon. All you need to do is farm the 2 first bosses, who are the easiest. Just repeat those 2 bosses, and that's going to give you the most chance of getting either chest and legs on one boss or feet, hands, and waist on the other boss. So that's the most effective way to farm this. It'll take you a couple days, but definitely well worth it on the Magicka Templar. Moving on to our next 5-piece. Since we are running light armor, this is a light armor build. 5 light and 2 heavy. I wanted something that's going to give me a lot of survivability and defense. So with AURORAN's here, I picked another light armor set, and that is the Buffer of the Swift. Buffer of the Swift is a PvP set. You can get this from the PvP boxes. I believe it's Cropsford, but you might want to double check on that. And this is also a light armor set, but it adds a ton of defense to your build, which is going to be really nice, especially in Battlegrounds, when you don't have things like CP defensives to help you out. This is going to make your light armor build survivable. So let's check out what it does. We've got max Magicka for the 2-piece. We've got physical and spell resistance on the 3 and 4. Really nice there. And then for the 5-piece, we've got reduced damage taken from players by 10%. This is really nice. As you saw with the stats, we're almost at max armor values already. So we're getting an additional 10% with that. It makes this light armor build feel pretty much in line with a heavy armor build. It's very tanky. You can absorb a lot of damage while also having all the nice offensive stats like penetration. So it's a nice blend, I think, and it works really good on this build. The way I'm using this is going to be on my weapons. So 2 pieces for the weapons and then running jewelry. Okay, so front bar, we've got lightning staff. This is going to be ideal for the Magicka Templar because lightning staffs give you an 8% boost to all of your AoE damage. Let's find that one just to point it out. So the Ancient Knowledge passive, equipping a lightning staff increases your damage done with area effect abilities by 8%. Area effect abilities, that's going to be your sweeps. That's also going to be your lightning. as well as our ultimate here. All of that is AoE damage, so we get a nice boost to all of our primary damage by using a lightning staff. So that's definitely preferred. I'm using Sharpened here as the main trait. Sharpened is going to give us better damage on our AURORAN's Thunder set. In case you didn't know, proc sets do not scale with your spell damage or your max magicka. Any of those stats will not increase proc set damage. The only way to increase proc set damage is passive damage boosts like our lightning staff, 8%, as well as penetration. So Sharpened is going to be a very good trait to have, also considering we're running a second proc set, which I'll get to in a minute. Sharpened is going to be great for this. Now I am using the Berserker enchant. This gives me a solid 350 spell damage for 5 seconds. And really, I think that's fine because your burst is going to happen in that 5-second window where you're gap closing, you're putting in sweeps, and then you're using your ultimate or your execute. So we've got lightning staff front bar. Back bar, we've got sword and shield, also the swift set. So I've got a powered one-hander. Any type is fine, dagger, mace, sword, whatever there. And then a sturdy shield that's just really going to help with our blocking, so we're not draining too much stamina when we block on the back bar. But you saw on the back bar, we have basically 30k resists. And when you have your block up, you're going to be very survivable. And then, like I mentioned, 3 pieces of jewelry here. 1 neck, 2 rings. I am using 1 spell damage enchant, 2 magicka recovery enchants. And I do have 1 protective trait here. I think you guys will find if you're running 1, even 2 or 3 protective, you will feel the difference. Doesn't seem like a lot. 1700 spell and physical doesn't seem like a lot on paper, but you're stacking it with all your other resistances, and it just makes the build feel super tanky. So I have enjoyed running 1. If I had more stones, I probably would run 2. Keep in mind that is going to lower your max magicka a little bit because you don't have the arcane trait. But I think the trade-off, especially in no CP and battlegrounds, where you don't have those CP defensives, I think the trade-off is worth it. So definitely think about running at least 1 protective here. That's what I'm using. It's really good. And then last up, let's talk about the monster set. I'm using the classic Falcon here for Magicka Templar, and that's just because we have lots of dot damage, you guys. Basically, when you deal damage over time, 8% chance to summon that flame damage meteor, 10k damage, AoE damage. It's really good. Has a quick cooldown still, 5 seconds. So this is going to add burst to your rotation. Usually we open with a damage over time effect, which is our Vampire's Bane. Your Lightning Staff is also a damage over time effect. Your Sweeps is also a damage over time effect. So you can see you're pretty much guaranteed to proc it within your 5-second rotation. So I definitely like this set still on Magicka Templar. The extra health is also really good, you guys, especially on light armor. I've decided to run 2 heavy here. That's because I don't have my Undaunted passives yet. If you do have those maxed out, you probably would want to run 1 heavy and 1 medium. In any order there, that gives you the max possible stats if you're using Undaunted. But for right now, I just have the both in heavy. That gives me a little bit of extra stats from heavy armor passives. So I think we mentioned the traits, and enchants, max magicka on everything if possible, impenetrable on everything if possible. A couple of well-fitted traits will be good as well, maybe 1 or 2 of those. Let's jump into the skills. Front bar, which is our lightning staff again. We've got Radiant Glory. Even though this build does mostly AoE damage, Radiant Glory is still going to be very nice for finishing off enemies that are low health. This did get updated recently where it now has just a 1.8 second cast, which I think is perfect for this build. It used to be longer, it used to make you more vulnerable, which on a light armor build in melee range was kind of bad. But now, since it's only 1.8 seconds, I think this is really good now. The cost is also lower. And basically, it's going to be really good to execute targets, both in melee range and from a distance. So I definitely like this, especially in no CP and battlegrounds. Great skill. Toppling charge, you saw there, that's how we are opening up with our AURORAN set. Does single target gap closer damage. Now, this is getting kind of an interesting buff in Elseweyr. Right now, it has a minimum range where you cannot, 3.5 meters, where you cannot cast it. You can see that it gets grayed out here. So here I can cast it. Here I cannot. But next chapter, that minimum range is going to go away. So this is going to become almost a spammable and a stun ability here because it does do a stun. So you notice we don't have any other stuns. Like I'm not running Javelin, for example, because you're going to be able to use Toppling Charge as both a gap closer and a stun. So you basically save yourself a skill slot by doing it this way. The enemy is casting, they get set off balance. I believe that's going to also apply off balance all of the time on Magicka Templar in the new chapter. So I definitely recommend this skill. It's going to get some nice buffs coming up soon. And like I mentioned, this is how you're going to gap close and start proccing your AURORAN set right there. Next up, Elusive Mist. We're using this for the damage mitigation here. 75% damage reduction. Also gives you major expedition. And basically it's like a reset. Think of it like a Magicka Nightblade Cloak. Not quite the same type of skill, but it does basically the same thing where you can get out of trouble and come to a different location, maybe set up your defensive buffs, block, heal, whatever you need to do. So I still really like Mistform front bar on the Magicka Templar. I think it's just good to have that escape tool. I know some people are not using this as much. Race Against Time, the Psijic Order skill is getting a similar kind of effect here where it's going to remove snares too. But the thing about Race Against Time is you don't get that 75% damage reduction, which really is huge in PvP. So I'm still going to use it. I think it's a great skill. Definitely check it out if you have not. It makes your build very tanky. Then we've got Puncturing Sweeps, which we talked about. Does a nice snare, does AoE damage in front of you. And like we said, that's going to synergize really well with AURORANs, getting you basically a double sweeps. Now, just realize that this does not proc AURORANs because it's not single target, it's AoE. So the way you can proc that is, again, gap closing, or even a light attack from your staff will proc AURORANs while you're jabbing. So just make sure you keep that up even while jabs is going. Vampire's Bane. This is actually a very important skill to have for a couple of reasons, mostly having to do with our Templar passives, okay? So first of all, the dot is really nice. 11k flame damage over 11 seconds is really good. This is another chance to proc Valken Scoria, like you can see right there. And it also does a nice snare. It's going to help you close that gap and get into sweeps mode a lot faster. Now that's just the basics of the skill. Two things it also does. Number one, it gives you the major prophecy buff, which you can see on my buff bar there for 10 seconds. That's an extra 10% spell critical. Really important because we're not using Inner Light. We're not using spell crit potions. So this is the only way that we're going to get the major prophecy buff. Now, second thing you'll see here, not only am I getting prophecy, but I am getting minor sorcery, and that's from another Magicka Templar passive in the Dawn's Wrath skill line. It is right here, the Illuminate passive, casting Dawn's Wrath. Abilities gives you minor sorcery for 20 seconds, and it increases your spell damage by 10%. This got double buffed in the Murkmire DLC, I think it was. Used to be 5%, now it's doubled to 10%, and this is amazing. Gives Magicka Templar some of the highest spell damage in the game. Also, I passed by it really quick. Prism gives you 3 ultimate every 6 seconds, and you should be casting this basically about every 6 seconds with a new target, so that gives you the 3 ultimate back as well. So you're getting just tons of effects for using this one skill, so make sure you slot that. And then for our ultimate here, we've got Crescent Sweep. Crescent Sweep does a nice bit of upfront damage. Notice that you get 60% more damage if the target is in front of you directly, so just make sure you are in their face. You want to get right up, all up in their grill, and then make sure you hit that ultimate. Really low cost too, you guys. 72 ultimate means you can spam this, and it does do a good bit of damage. So I definitely recommend that for your front bar ultimate. Now, back bar. This is our Sword and Shield. Now, right now I'm using Total Dark, and I still think Total Dark is a good skill in no CP and Battlegrounds, just for the extra healing you get back. Now, this will get nerfed in the next chapter. They're going to reduce the damage a little bit. That over 6k magic damage is really strong. They are going to reduce that, but the healing effect will still be the same. So basically, you cast this on a target, and it heals you for a good chunk every time they do damage to you. So it's nice as a defensive skill. I can't cast it here on a dummy, but really bursty enemies like Stam Nightblade, Stamina Templar, Stam Sorcerer, even Magicka Sorcerer, you put this on them, they'll be damaging themselves and healing you. So it is a nice skill to run. You may consider other things though, especially since the damage is going to get nerfed next patch. Now what I recommend you check out is another skill here that's getting a buff, and that's going to be Radiant Aura. Okay, Radiant Aura is going to be a nice skill you can run in place of this. So if you're not familiar with it, Radiant Aura is minor Magicka Steel, basically the same buff as Elemental Drain. Now right now it costs a lot of Magicka to cast this. 3k Magicka on live server is a lot, but that is giving you minor Magicka Steel against any enemy in that range, and the range is pretty big. What is it here? 25 meters. So the buff that this is getting is it's now going to be free. It's going to be free to cast. It's still going to give you all those minor buffs, so minor fortitude, minor endurance, minor intellect, increases all of your recoveries by 10%. But this is what I talked about in the stats. If you want to run more damage, if you want to run the Lover Mundus, for example, you can consider slotting this, and you're going to get a nice bit of Magicka recovery when you cast this. Next up, we got Extended Ritual. This is just the standard Templar cleanse. You definitely want this slotted. It cleanses up to 5 harmful effects. Groupmates can use the synergy. Gives a nice bit of healing over time as well. So it's a really great skill. Then we've got our Burst Heal. I'm using the Honor the Dead morph just because this gives you a nice bit of Magicka back, because the skill is expensive to cast. So about 4k there, even on a light armor build. It's really expensive, you guys. But you're getting 60% of that back. So that's basically 2,400 Magicka over 6 seconds. Now I've got Degeneration here. This gives us the major sorcery buff. Also gives us a chance to get healed off light or heavy attacks. Now you can run other things here as well. You could put Race Against Time, which we mentioned from the Stygic Order. But really the reason why I like this is it just frees up my potion. Because now that I have major sorcery and I have major prophecy, I can use my tripods. And tripods are really good, especially if you're playing in Battlegrounds in no CP, because it's going to give you tons of stats back. So I really felt like I needed this buff. If you don't use Degeneration, then you'll need to get it from somewhere else, and you'll likely have to get it from a potion. You can use a spell power potion in that case. So you decide what you prefer. Just for me, I felt like this was giving me the best benefit here in terms of how I could use my stats and my potions. Now lastly, we got Channel Focus. This is just our Major Resolve, Major Ward. Within the rune, we also get 50% more damage reduction. We're also getting that active recovery. 240 Magicka every 1 second. That's basically, what, 480 Magicka recovery. Does not still show up on your stat sheet though, but that is what you're getting back from it. So it's a great skill. Make sure you always have this running. And if you're taking pressure, it's really cheap to cast. Just throw it down because it makes you more defensive while you're in that area. For the ultimate here, you've got choices too. Easiest thing to slot is going to be Remembrance, you guys. Especially if you don't have Somerset expansion yet, or you don't have the Stygic Order leveled up to 10. I think Remembrance is going to be your best option because this gives you major protection for 10 seconds. It's going to make you very tanky. Gives you nice healing, really strong healing every 1 second for 4 seconds. You are immobilized though. You're stuck in place when you cast it. So that part's not that great, but it will help you recover and give you some extra time to come back. So let's just go over some passives really quick. Adric Spear, you'll want to unlock all of these passives. These are more of your offensive-oriented passives. Increase critical damage. Spear Wall is really important on this build. You gain minor protection for 3 seconds, as long as you're using one of these Adric's Spear abilities. So we get that minor protection When we gap close off of toppling charge, you can see it there for 3 seconds. And then when you are channeling sweeps, you also have minor protection, which you can see that little buff that's giving you 8% reduced damage. So just make sure you are using sweeps as much as possible because that's going to give you that minor protection buff. Burning Light gives us a 25% chance to proc magic damage every half second. Very good for offense. And then we get a little bit extra spell resist on the Magicka Templar for Balanced Warrior. Dawn's Wrath, we basically talked about these. These are very important. You're proccing all of these with Vampire's Bane. So you get the increased duration, not really a big deal. But you get the extra ultimate, 3 every 6. You get minor sorcery, 10% spell damage. You also get reduced cost here off of all of your abilities and your ultimate. So make sure you pick up all those amazing, amazing passives. And then our Restoring Light Tree, this is basically what makes the Templar as tanky as it is. These are healing passives. So you get extra healing when you're lower health. Sacred Ground, this is really going to help with our healing as well because we get minor mending while we're standing in Rune or Cleansing Ritual, Extended Ritual basically. So something you can think about if you need to heal. You can heal just like that, but you're not getting minor mending. What you really want to do first is make sure you're in your Rune or in your Ritual. And you can see now I have my little green buff there on my buff tracker. That's minor mending, so I'm getting extra 8% heals now at this point. Once I leave those circles, then I also lose access to that minor mending. You can see that goes away. So my heals will not be as effective when I'm outside the house. So just keep that in mind. What else here? Light Weaver just gives us a ton of physical and spell resistance. When we use the ultimate, that's good. For your weapon passives here, you can grab all of them in one hand and shield. I typically ignore Deadly Bash on the Magicka build. I just don't have enough stamina, especially in a no CP environment, to be bashing. So I just usually save 2 points there, but you can grab those if you want. But you definitely need everything for your lightning staff here. All of these are important. As far as armor passives, you want everything in light armor. Pick up all of those. Heavy armor, you'll want your first 3. If you're doing 5-1-1, so 5 light, 1 heavy, 1 medium, you can pick up some of these in medium armor. I don't have those. Vampire, like I said, is an option for you guys. If you are a vampire, make sure you pick up at least 2 your supernatural recovery here. Gives you 10% magicka and stamina recovery, which is really nice for PvP. Undeath is also a nice passive to have when you're blocking. And healing, you get some extra damage mitigation there. Guild passives, you want Fighter's Guild to 10, Mage's Guild to 10, Psijic Order, we mentioned that's always an option. Make sure you're working towards 10 Assault. Combat Frenzy is a huge passive. I can't explain this enough to people. 20 Ultimate when you kill a player is huge. That's going to mean your uptime on Crescent Sweep is very, very fast. All of your racial passives, obviously, and then the really important one here in Alchemy, medicinal use. This gives us the full duration on our tripods, basically, giving you those buffs for as long as possible. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the Magicka Templar AURORAN PVP build. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you found it informative at all, make sure, as always, to crush that like button for me. And let me know what you liked in the comments below. Or if you have any questions on the build, be free to drop those down there as well. Basically, any way you guys can interact with these videos, whether it's likes, comments, sharing, I always appreciate that because it makes the video more likely to get noticed on YouTube and bring in people to the channel. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm going to throw in some extra gameplay of this build, so in case you're curious about how it plays or how it looks, definitely check that out all the way till the end, and I think that'll give you a really good idea. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you around in the next video.
They're feeling our blades now. have them on the run.